Thank you, Vicky. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. As you've heard, my name is Professor Grant Guilford. I'm Vice-Chancellor of Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand's globally ranked capital city university and New Zealand's top ranked university for research quality. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the launch of UNICA and Wellington University's joint webinar series, which will explore the response of capital city universities in Europe and the Asia Pacific to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It is fitting that our inaugural webinar is focused on a topic of such great importance, the climate crisis and the collective responsibility of our universities to tackle this issue. It is, of course, particularly timely given that this webinar is taking place during COP26. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of our attendees, university senior leaders, climate change academics, and sustainability office leaders and officials from Europe, the South Pacific, and Asia. I'd particularly like to acknowledge my co-chair for this event, the inspirational UNICA President, Professor Luciano Saso, with whom it's a great honour to be hosting this event. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our panellists, whose contributions to this event we are greatly looking forward to hearing. And Luciano and I will enjoy introducing you shortly. And finally, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the members of UNICA Green and SDGs Working Group. We're delighted to have you with us. Wellington University has a distinctive vision of being a world-leading capital city university and one of the great global civic universities. This identity is expressed in countless ways and led to our initial contact with UNICA. The most notable example is the Capital City Universities Initiative, in which we bring together universities around the world to debate topics of great global significance, very similar to the mandate for UNICA. At Wellington, we have defined our university in a number of distinctive ways, including those that relate to governing for the future and sustainability. And of course, that is what brings us together with you, the members of UNICA, on this incredibly important topic of climate change and associated ocean acidification. For us in the university, we're committed to this through our research and teaching, but also the way our university goes about its own institutional behaviour, including being net zero carbon by 2030 and having a 40% reduction in our gross emissions, which we've already achieved, but also influencing in a non-partisan way our government and the governments of the wider Asia Pacific and the world through the IPPC work our academics do. So it is a great pleasure to have you all here today for this topic, and I'd like to hand over to Luciano.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Grant. It is a great pleasure for me to be here. I'm Luciano Saso. I'm the president of UNICA, and today I'm very excited about this very important webinar that we organize together with the Victoria University of Wellington. This, I think, is one of the also fruits, in a way, of a long collaboration that we started a few years ago with the University of Wellington. And at that time, before COVID, we were not doing webinars, so I had the pleasure to travel actually in person to Wellington. And it was a fantastic trip, but also very long. It took more than one day for 24 hours. And now it's really a pleasure to continue this collaboration, by Zoom. It's not exactly the same, but also offers the opportunity to share ideas and to work together. So we are planning a series of events on SDGs. We started, of course, with one of the most important SDGs, the number 13 today. We will have a conversation with 4 speakers from UNICA and from the Asia Pacific region. We try to choose also geographically, concerning UNICA colleagues from the north and from the south. UNICA at the moment has 54 universities in Europe, in 38 capital cities. And indeed, we go from the far north of Finland and Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, to the south of course, Spain, Italy, Greece, etc. So we have actually 2 distinguished speakers from UNICA that we will introduce in a moment. UNICA is very much committed on the work on SDGs. We have a specialized working group, which is chaired by Matthew Lawson, Senior Social Responsibility and Sustainability Programs Manager at the University of Edinburgh. And in this working group, we have actually a continuous discussion related to sustainable development SDGs. We try to share good practices in UNICA to improve actually the approach and the contribution that universities can give to this important topic. So without further ado, I would like to thank Professor Guilford, the Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University of Wellington. I want also to thank very much Matthew Omegar, Principal Advisor of the same university, and Blair McRae, Assistant Vice-Chancellor International at Wellington University, because we actually started this idea a few months ago, and we met several times online for the preparation of this event. And also, of course, I want to thank very much the UNICA Secretariat in Brussels with Laura Colò, Vicky Xonca, and Laura Brossico. So I give back the floor to you, Grant, for the introduction of your speakers.
Thank you, Luciano. So I'd like to, it's my great pleasure, I should say, to introduce Professor Sally Wheeler. Sally is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for International Strategy and Dean of the Australian National University College of Law. Prior to taking up these positions at ANU, Sally was a Professor and Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and Enterprise at Queen's University in Belfast. She is an internationally esteemed legal scholar with research interests in socio-legal studies, corporate law and contract law. And it's my great pleasure to welcome her to the panel today. And I'd also like to introduce Professor Benjamin Horton. Benjamin is Director of the Earth Observatory in Singapore and a Professor in the Asian School of Environment at Nanyang Technological University, or NTU. Benjamin is a winner of multiple awards, which I won't go into today, but you can check on the esteemed pedigree. His research concerns sea level change with the aim of understanding and integrating the external and internal mechanisms that have determined sea level changes in the past and which will shape sea level changes in the future. So again, welcome, Benjamin. Over to you, Luciano.
Yes. So thank you, Grant. From our side, from UNICA, we also have two distinguished speakers. We have Professor Hanna Snellman from the University of Helsinki. So as I mentioned before, so the north of UNICA. And also we try to balance also the background of our speakers, because Professor Snellman is from the humanities. She has been Dean of the Faculty of Arts at the University of Helsinki, and also very much involved in different activities in Finland, including also the Finnish Research Infrastructure Committee of the Academy of Finland and many others, roles that she played. And now, for the sake of time, I will not go through all the details. But very, very important is that Hanna is also a member of the steering committee of UNICA, so she will actually speak on behalf of the University of Helsinki, but also on behalf of UNICA also. And then we have another distinguished colleagues from the south of UNICA, so from Spain, Complutense, University of Madrid. We have Jorge, Jesús, Gómez, Sanz. And also in terms of background, a completely different background, because Jorge is a computer scientist. Actually did a very interesting research in the field of distributed artificial intelligence. So I think it will be interesting to see the points of view of Hanna and Jorge from completely different background. So we decided with Grant to have a very informal conversation. So we actually decided to forbid PowerPoint in this event, so no slides will be allowed. And so now we start a conversation. I give the floor back to you, Grant, for the first question to the panelists.
Thank you, Luciano. I wonder if I might invite the panelists just to make a brief introductory statement about their interests in climate change, and from the way they see the world, from their disciplines, the role they think capital city universities should play in addressing this enormous challenge. So start with Sally Wheeler, please.
Thanks very much, Vice-Chancellor. Perhaps I could begin by acknowledging and celebrating the traditional owners of the land from which I speak to you, which is the Ngunnawal Ngambri people of the Canberra region, who have cared for country for many, many generations, and should rightly be celebrated for that. Surely the most patient and humble people in the world. So I suppose for me, I have two hats on. One, disciplinary hat, in terms of thinking about how not only governments can regulate the climate crisis, but also thinking around insurance and institutional investors, the difference they make to corporate behavior. Interestingly, Australia is at the forefront of some of the sharpest, most observable climate change: coral bleaching, bushfires, huge hailstorms. They're all products of substantial amounts of climate change, and yet it is still a nation state that derives much of its GDP from mining and other activities. So I'm interested in thinking about an investment response to that, but I'm also interested in thinking about the leadership that we as a university can give our students. We have a variety of initiatives at ANU, and one of the reasons for doing that is not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because it brings the whole of campus together as a community, staff and students united in wanting to achieve particular things around climate change.
Thank you, Sally. You, Benjamin, if I might bring you in, and then I'll hand back to Luciano.
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name's Ben Horton. As has been introduced, I'm Director of the Earth Observatory of Singapore. So this is a research centre of excellence at Nanyang Technological University. We focus on fundamental science of geohazards and climate change. We have a team of around 170 researchers, so we're a big unit, focusing on the changes that are occurring in Southeast Asia. Personally, I've spent 25 years studying climate change. I was an author on the IPCC 5th Assessment Report, and I'm an editor of the 6th Assessment Report. So what's happening to climate change concerns me greatly. I commonly use the phrase that if you knew what I knew, you would be absolutely petrified about what the Earth can do with very, very small forcing factors on temperature. So in my role at NTU, we, as the Earth Observatory of Singapore, thought there was a huge knowledge gap in young Singaporeans regarding sustainability and climate change. So the Earth Observatory of Singapore, that started out in 2008 to solve this problem, changed the high school curriculum by working with the Ministry of Education. Once we had high school kids who were interested in sustainability, we had to create an undergraduate division, and we created a division known as the Asian School of the Environment, for which I was very honoured to be one of the first chairs. This is a boutique school. It has around 50 undergraduates per year, but they are producing, and the first ones graduated in 2018, the first graduates in Singapore that were educated in Earth system science. And their employment statistics are in greater than 90%. They're taken up by all areas. We originally thought they would just go into research and working for NGOs, but they're being picked up by all the banking and the industrial centres. The next thing that EOS did was create a graduate programme, creating a PhD programme to start to tap in the knowledge of the undergraduates in Singapore, and also the knowledge around Southeast Asia, to try and build this knowledge base and try to make a difference. And then the final thing that I would like us to talk about today is that Asia is well known for lagging behind areas elsewhere in the world on climate change. But I think that all regions need to be so much more ambitious on climate change and sustainability. So the policies that each of these universities put in over the last 5 years are not sufficient. So you have to be more ambitious. And this is exactly what I tried to get NTU to do. So NTU had a sustainability plan. They had a plan that we will be carbon neutral by somewhere in the middle of the century. And I said, this isn't sufficient. So fortunately, by the leadership of Subra Suresh at NTU, we have an aim of being carbon neutral by 2035. And that is very ambitious for a research intensive university. But Subra's put his neck on the block about that, and he started a new sustainability office. It's exactly the type of ambition that world-leading universities must have. We must have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Let's continue with Hanna, please. Would you like to intervene?
Yes, thank you. First, a few words about Finland, where I come from. So my name is Hanna Snellman. I'm Vice-Rector of the University of Helsinki. Finland is an Arctic country, and I was so happy to hear Sally Wheeler's mention on celebrating the indigenous peoples of Australia. In Finland also has indigenous peoples. We have the only indigenous peoples of the European Union area, the Sami. And people think that they only live in Lapland, but actually nowadays most of them live in Helsinki, the capital of Finland. And that's something I mentioned them not only to celebrate them, but also that there's a lot of indigenous knowledge that we have to take into to listen to. Of course, I truly believe in scientific data on global warming, but also the indigenous people have something to tell us. And in Helsinki we have 2 professors in indigenous studies, and they also deal a lot with climate change. Another aspect of Finland is that we have a lot of forests. 75% of Finland is covered with forests. So that also plays a role in as carbon sinks. So we have really to take good care of our forests, because it has a global effect what we do with our resources. I think what we as capital city universities should do is to raise awareness of climate. We can do it by teaching. So I think our duty is to educate future-ready students who, in all their actions, they take the SDGs into account, and they have the knowledge. So whatever profession they have, they could be medical doctors or teachers of English language, etc. We teach them all. But so when they are ready from university, they are ready. And what we have done at the Helsinki University is that we have started a sustainability course, which is obligatory to every student. So whatever subject you have, whatever you are majoring in, you have to have the basics of sustainability. And of course, climate is one aspect of that. Then, of course, our second biggest duty is research at the university. So we have to make it possible in the leadership that there are resources to do research on climate and climate change, and that has been done a lot in Finland and in Helsinki. We are very good in atmospheric sciences. We have an academician, Markku Kulmala, who has measuring stations all over the world, and etc. And then, of course, what we do, our actions, what we do, how do we heat our buildings? Helsinki is a very cold city, so we have to have heating most of the year. We don't need air conditioning in the summer. It's more or less we are fine. But everything, heating, etc. Those things that we have to think about all the time. And what I think is a duty as a capital city university is uniting forces, like what we are doing today. Like what we are doing, like UNICA is a very important network of capital city universities. So we have to share our good practices, give advice to each other, and also do that in a national level. Like if I take the Finnish case, University of Helsinki is the oldest and the biggest and the most prestigious university in Finland. So we have the leading role. So we have to collaborate with other universities of Finland and together think of the ways to have a more sustainable future. And in the European case also, the European university networks are important. University of Helsinki is a member of UNA Europa, and there we have a sustainability course, a BA program. So there will be bachelors who have sustainability as their major. And for the Helsinki perspective, our input for that program is more or less climate change. And also what we have micro credentials, and that is something capital cities could share, the micro credentials of climate. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. Very interesting. And now, last but not least, Jorge, please, would you like to intervene?
Thank you, Luciano. Yeah, I'm Jorge Gómez from Universidad Complutense of Madrid. Let me start by saying that we are very small. We are very small, and we are well realized when the Earth punishes us. And I want to send our support to the people in the Canary Island. They are going through an erupting volcano. Those who have suffered this kind of trauma know what I'm talking about. So this is a demonstration that when the Earth wants to do something, the humans can do very little. So we need to keep our environment. We need to cradle it as it was a baby and to take care of it. And what's the role of university here? I was thinking that the people that we are here are already very sustainable. In the case of my university, we are positioning in the Green Metric ranking in the position 58, which is rather good. So the problem is how to reach those who are not here. And I think this is where the role of universities come into place. One role is teaching, training. Those colleagues who have spoken before have already pointed out that training students to raise awareness, to participate in the society, and bring the change to those institutions they go to. This is very important. And in the case of my universities, it's huge. I mean, the numbers of my university, for those who don't know, are at the range of a small city. We are 85,000 people in my university. So in terms of budget, we are the 6th city in Spain. So these are the responsibility we have, and we are very committed to climate change. So committed that I'm the first Vice-Rector with responsibilities in sustainability. It's true that the means that we have are not those that we would like, but we do what we can, and I think we are doing great at the moment. In terms of research for fighting the climate change, I think this has to be done in a multidisciplinary way. And my university has an excellent position to do this because we have 26 faculties from every discipline. So it's not a technical university, but it enables us to see this problem from different perspectives. This is very helpful for initiatives like UNA Europa, where we are preparing degrees dealing with sustainability, very much like in the lines of work that my colleagues were pointing out. And I think that this is our role here, enables of the change. It's not, we can serve as an example, acquiring good practices, but the things that we do have very little impact. Our impact is in the students, training the students, raising awareness about climate change, and bringing them into the society so that they can bring these ideas into different organizations and they can distribute and expand the impact of this education. Not much to say, Luciano, because we have 1 hour long of discussions, and I think it's better to go another round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Very interesting. So, Grant, if you agree, I will launch another broader question. Of course, the time is very limited, so the participants will understand that we cannot go too deep on each question, but so we are trying our best to share, again, ideas and good practices. one point for me very important is to prioritize things at our institutions, because of course all of us are convinced that this goal SDG 13 is extremely important. We have to try our best, but what we are facing, I think, at our universities, at our cities, at our countries, is always the lack of resources in terms of human resources, economical resources. So the general question, and I know the answer is not easy, how, can we prioritize, in our university, but also our cities, because of course, Ben is leading a research center, so not exactly a university, in terms of the different missions we have. So we spoke about research, education, organization. We can think also about architecture of our university, because we know that, the buildings we have sometimes are not, prepared for some of these, situations. So, and then, of course, again, in UNICA, we have the north and the south, and in terms of temperature can be completely different all over the year. So how can we think of, let's say, a very good organization in our universities, also in terms of relationship between the leadership, for instance, so presidents, vice presidents, and then also the offices. In UNICA, in many UNICA universities, we have extremely active offices for sustainable development, and how can we organize them in the best way? How can we fund them in the best way? So, sorry, a very general question, and maybe we can start, Grant, if you agree, with the same order, but please, anyone can jump in at any time. This is an informal conversation, so I would like to give the floor to Sally.
Thank you. I was really taken with the idea that students going to Helsinki University have to do a sustainability course, because while we have programs that students can enroll to do for degrees, it's certainly not something that we roll out right across the university with every student engaged. I think that's a really good idea. The way we have tried to mainstream our interest in climate is by the Vice-Chancellor adopting as an initiative something called, that he calls Below Zero. And it's actually approved by the University Council. And so, as he tells us, he kind of has to do it now. And I can see the Vice-Chancellor of Wellington smiling there. We have a whole program laid out so that by 2025, we anticipate having net zero emissions. By 2030, we want to be below zero emissions. We have an ANU Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions, ICEDS, which we try to join up then interdisciplinary solutions across campus. So that Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions, that brings together 500 researchers from across ANU. And every academic unit within ANU has to talk, if it's bidding for research funds from the institution, about how it is going to address the challenges of below zero and sustainability. We also have something called the Centre for Climate Economics and Policy based at the Crawford School of Public Policy. So it's an incredibly public commitment that we've made. We also support student enterprise. Group of our students are currently engaged on building a solar-powered car, for example, and we would have regular updates about that. And for us, it's not just about trying as an institution to actually sort of reduce emissions. It's about re-engineering what we do. We've had an opportunity to do that. We had 230 buildings on campus. Some of them were destroyed beyond use. Some of them were severely damaged, 230 of them, in a hailstorm that ravaged our campus in 2020. And we have taken the opportunity when we go to rebuild those to re-engineer a long climate-friendly solution for those buildings in terms of the air conditioning that we would want in the summer, etc. So for us, it's a campus-wide, very public commitment. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Sally. Maybe we continue with Ben. we finish this round, and then Grant, you will start another round.
Well, I could sort of repeat some of the very ambitious plans that the other universities have had. So similar to the University of Helsinki, beginning in 2022, every undergraduate at NTU, and there are 22,000 of them, it's a big university for Singapore, has to take a course in sustainability. So that doesn't matter whether you're a medic, in engineering, humanities, or in the physical sciences like we are at EOS, everyone has to do that. Similar to ANU, we're proposing at NTU that we have a climate action plan. So not just a sustainability office, to have a division within that looks at a climate action plan. Not only going to net zero, but trying to be carbon positive. So actually absorbing more of the carbon than we actually emit. And NTU's got a little bit of an advantage over, I imagine, many other campuses, because we're renowned for having a green campus. We have tropical rainforests within our grounds, so we're absorbing a lot of the nature-based solutions here. The important thing that I hope that I think it's obvious, but that we all should be aware of, is that we're an educational institute and the vast majority of our numbers are our students. And if we look at the climate debate, over the last 30 years, there's been a significant switch. It used to be all about developed versus developing countries, trying to get agreements, and that's where the Paris Agreement sort of came out of. Now it's a generational debate. If we have a look at COP26, you know, Greta Thunberg it was an instigator, a catalyst, but it's very much young versus old. The senior people want to remain as the status quo. The young people want change, and we as educational institutions have a great deal of responsibility in educating every single student on climate. And then the final thing, which I think Jorge said, is that climate is multidisciplinary, it's holistic. Yes, maybe the basics are in the science to understand, you know, how much sea level's rising, how hot's it going to be, what's the rainfall going to be. But to solve it is holistic. It's going to take the science, it's going to take the humanity, it's going to take the lawyers, it's going to take the business, it's going to take, so it's all about these climate impacts and solutions. So I really think the university can come together. And I think, seeing as we have some very important people online, I would like to know that in your president's offices, do you have a climate officer there? Someone who actually knows something about it, whether they're a humanitarian or a scientist, but they have spent their career studying the perils of climate. And so you can be constantly reminded and checked off on what you're doing. I think it's, you know, we know that it's, everyone says this, that it's the problem that will define our boundaries of civilization in the 21st century. So appoint someone to your president's office who knows about climate. There's no excuses. Each one of you are world-leading universities. You've got a world-leading climate scientist. Put them in your president's office. And if you haven't got a world-leading climate scientist or climate impacts or solutions, go and hire one. Put them in your office. It's key.
Thank you, Ben. In the meantime, I see that there are some good questions in the chat. We hope we will have time to answer. So for the moment, I thank Arnim Heinemann from the University of Bayreuth, also president of the S group of the university, to put this interesting question. We will see. We hope we have time to address it. I think, Sally, if you want to just very quickly, you raise your hand. So I guess you want to make a very short intervention, and then we continue with Hanna and Jorge.
Sure. I mean, my first intervention was that I wouldn't wish on any world-leading climate scientist a spell in their university president's office. But I guess my other point would be that I'm very interested in the whole idea of the generational shift around climate change, around education, how we mainstream that and make it actually an educational offering rather than something that students just tick off. And if we have time, I think I would be really happy to talk about that.
Perfect, thank you. So if Hanna and Jorge, you make the miracle, it'll be very short, so we try to do another round that will be led by Grant.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry.
Just to reply to the question whether we have a climate specialist in the president's office, we have a sustainability specialist because we think that these all are interlinked, sustainability. So we not only have climate there, but we do have our best professor in the university board. So he reminds us about these things in every board meeting. So whether in the board or president's office, I think somewhere there should be someone who's saying that, hey, walk like you talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanna. Jorge, to conclude this round.
Yeah, very briefly. Well, I agree with Benjamin, what he said about training the students. As I said before, it's a multidisciplinary thing, and we need to take into account all the disciplines. So I'm not so sure about this generational shift you are mentioning, because I remember when I was young, I was given also instructions about climate change. Maybe they were not so much supported by scientific evidence, but there was a shout 40 years ago about all these things. And I remember clearly how they were warning that petrol was going to disappear from the earth, and we need to move to another sources of energy. And we haven't. We are in the process of doing this. And I think the responsibility of the university should to show that this is possible. And it's very difficult. It's not enough to raise awareness. We need to find ways to transform the society. And doing this in a sustainable way is very difficult. I see universities as a laboratory where they can try out things. We have a strong lines of work in entrepreneurship related with climate change, how we can create sustainable industry. And it's already difficult to maintain a startup. Maintain a startup related with climate change is even more difficult. It's true that there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of interest, but making it profitable, it's something that is still not solved. It's not a scientific problem. It's a problem of humans. How do we organize and how we raise benefits in this society? And this is one of the first questions that needs to be answered, because otherwise we can do whatever you want with green energy. We can convert our universities in consumers of dioxide carbon by increasing our biodiversity, as Benjamin was saying. But we need to give the key to society to build a sustainable industry, and this is still a challenge, and I don't hear much about this. We can change our activities, but we need to tackle this. Otherwise, other efforts has just minor changes.
Thank you, Jorge. Over to you, Grant.
I'm interested in coming back to the capital city university theme, and I'm interested in hearing from the panelists as to how they think our universities can influence government thinking. What's the best approach? Is it critical friend? Is it providing multidisciplinary data with solutions and hoping policy is created? Is it creating the policy? Is it the critic and conscience role where you criticize publicly, or a combination thereof? Probably start with Sally again.
So I think it's all of those. I also think it is working with particular industries that are key to your country. So in Australia, that would be agriculture and mining. So at ANU, we have a variety of projects where we're trying to work with agriculture, not just around emissions, but also around drought-resistant crops and all of those sorts of things. So actually, instead of just pushing it back on government, to be completing the circle, working with industry, and it also depends, I think, on the hue of your particular government. If you have a government that is not necessarily a government that values and listens to expertise, then that loop through industry is definitely the one to take.
Ben.
Well, I think Singapore may be a little bit of a special case in point in the fact that, you know, we are a capital city stroke country. One of the aspects that, however, that enables us to do here in Singapore is that you can have, there are very limited degrees of freedom from yourself to very, very important ministers. And so you can get in touch with the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the Minister of National Development or the Minister of Sustainability Environment. And, you know, within a relatively short space of time, they know me on a first name basis. Singapore also, perhaps in contrast to what Sally said, the government are exceedingly knowledgeable. They accept climate change, but they were underestimating the urgency. So when EOS over the last few years has made a complete sort of like lots of roundtables, our mission is to try and get the government to realise that climate is urgent and Singapore is at threat. And as a result, the Prime Minister of Singapore in 2019 and 20 said that climate change was an existential threat to the nation. So there are huge advantages in working in a capital city where you've got small degrees of freedom to people who make a lot of power. One of the limitations, however, of Singapore is its influence on the region. Singapore, in my opinion, when global priorities align with national priorities, it can do amazing things in science. But when global priorities don't align, then there isn't really the interest. But maybe that's where universities can take the role instead of governments. Maybe governments here in Singapore do not want to seem to be overreaching into agendas of other nations, but a university can develop those collaborations. Particularly in Singapore, we've got a very, very wealthy nation here in Singapore, but we have many developing countries on our boundaries who are suffering greatly from climate change and do not have the resilience that our economy provides. And I think that that's something that I've been very interested in, is our university building up collaborations. But then I run into a problem that our university is all about rankings. So our university only likes to work with other universities that are in the top 50 in the world. If Harvard was placed in Malaysia, we'd be all over an interaction with those. But because Malaysia doesn't have a university in the top 50, it's not so interesting. But if we want to make places resilient to climate change, we have to work with developed and developing countries and their universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Hanna.
Did you say my name?
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't realize Hanna. But I'm used to hearing Anna. Okay. Thank you. I agree with Benjamin on that. We have to have everyone on board, and it's our responsibility as capital city universities, which most of the cases are the leading universities of their countries, to not only take look at the rankings and have those on board who are in the same sort of ranking level. So, but it's not everyone agrees with that in my university, but that's my personal opinion. With the Finnish government, it's quite easy to get our message through. Our professors are asked as specialists. So if the government is making decisions where climate is somehow discussed, our professors are invited to be in the discussion. So in that respect, I have nothing to complain about our government. There are other things I could complain about. And also the rector of the university meets the prime minister very often, and also other ministers, and we have workshops, etc. Finland is a country of very low hierarchies. So that, in that respect, it's easy. Thank you.
Okay, you're next there.
Jorge, I think it's...
Yeah, well, there is a thin line between activism and promoting the change in a, let's say, educated way. From the perspective of our institution, of course, we have conversations with the government about these problems, but I think our role is not pushing. I think it's not necessary in European governments to raise awareness in the government about the importance of the climate change. There is, in the case of Spain, there's even a ministry for this, so it cannot be given a higher importance than that. But our role is to tell the ministry how this can be enforced. I mean, we can suggest, give comments about the policies that could be used to make this a reality. But the key problem is still what I was mentioning before. How do you bring this change to the society? Because just making the policies is not enough. You need to teach people how you can keep, well, this is another discussion, if we can keep our standard of daily living in the Western societies or in the first world societies, and if it is a sustainable way of living. This is a debate we can hold in the universities, and we can give the key points. It's very easy to say, let's go back to the tents, let's forget about the buildings, let's live in a more connected way with the nature. But I don't think that is the way to proceed. So I think our role is to tell the government how this could be done in an affordable way, using the universities to hold this debate. We already are seeing this in the past, before the COVID. We were hosting in my university the climate, the social, I can't remember the number, the social meeting, the social alternative to the COP25 in Madrid, when we were celebrating and hosting the United Nations. And there was a huge difference between the conversations in the main area, in the green area, with politicians and industry and this, in the part of the social activists. They were very different, but it was good that it was hosted in the university, because we were able to hold very interesting debates and raise very practical points. And we need to highlight those points and put them into recommendations to the governments. I think this is what we can do at the moment, and I'm not so much as protesters or as institutions that claim that something has to be done, but we need to point out the things to be done. We are the laboratories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. So, Grant, I think we don't have time to do another round. We only have 8 minutes, but there are some questions in the chat. So if you agree, we can try very quickly to address them. Maybe only one speaker can reply to each of them for the sake of time. We have an interesting question from Professor Hanna from the University of Bayreuth, as I mentioned, president of S Group of universities in Europe. And he is asking, how would you assess the amount of bottom-up onboarding in your institutions with regard to sustainable awareness, in particular when it comes to concrete action, such as green mobility, and to accepting limitations or more restrictive rules for mobility? Who would like to take that? Onboarding, the involvement of colleagues, both. I mean, of course, students are very much involved. We know, maybe colleagues depends on probably on the faculties. So, do you have strategies at your university? Maybe Helsinki or Complutense, to try to really make everyone aware of these issues?
Maybe I could just say a suggestion that we made in the Asian School of the Environment, that so NTU, when you work at NTU, you're basically classified as a civil servant. And all civil servants in Singapore have an appraisal system. And this basically, and this is a great thing for an academic, you get a bonus at the end of the year based upon your performance. And this would traditionally be a performance in terms of what your teaching scores are, what your research productivity is. But we have another one which is on service. and we changed that service to include examples of where you have promoted sustainability. And another example is where you've promoted equality, inclusion, diversity. So we put that in there. So people who do spend their time doing workshops, as Jorge said, or promoting it within high school students are rewarded for this. But the next stage is to take that up to higher levels. As a departmental chair, when I was mentoring my young faculty and they said, well, you know, I may want to do some sustainability activities with high school, but this means that I cannot write my research grant. You know what I'm going to say to them? You're a young faculty, you want to get tenure, write your research grant. So I think there needs to be a change from on top, that things that promote sustainability are not just words at the university, it's the way that we promote and tenure people. That's something that we have the power to do. And then those people will be rewarded for those actions. That's just something we tried internally because we were able to do that, but it's something that we're trying to get changes at the top of the university to do with promotion and tenure.
Thank you, Ben. I think we don't have time to continue. I want to give you again the floor, Grant. I just want to mention that there are 2 or 3 other very interesting questions in the chat. So we need to do other webinars together, because Katie Miller also was asking how can universities best support entrepreneurial ideas from students, you know, that may contribute to technologies that help address climate change. I think this is a key question, so we have to do a webinar just on that. And also Matthew Lawson, that the chair of the UNICA Green and SDG group of UNICA, is also asking what approaches have your university taken to ensure climate change is embedded into decision-making processes. For example, in the state's development, alumni and research income, business travel, etc. So these are key questions. I think we need to discuss them in other webinars. But again, from me, thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you to all the participants, again, to the offices, Matthew in Wellington, and Laura and Vicky in Brussels. And I give again the floor to you, Grant, for the final word.
Thank you very much, Luciano. I just would really probably just leverage off Ben's final comments, and to your president, I would say that universities will be judged on what they are good for, not at what they're good at. And that means you need to set aside rankings, and you need to think about what our universities do to our communities in support of things like climate change, things like inequality. That's what will judge a good university in the future. So on that note, thank you all, panelists, wonderful contributions, and thank you very much for everything you've provided, and thank you, Luciano.
Thank you, Grant. It has been a pleasure to work with the University of Wellington. So we are looking forward to the next webinars of the series. I think this format is again very short due to the time zones. So we have exactly at the moment 12 hours different, but in the future there will be a bit better configuration. So again, thank you to the panelists for the great contribution. Thank you to the University of Wellington, and see you next time. So please follow us on the website of the University of Wellington, on the website of UNICA. We will put there more information. Again, the recording of this webinar is there, so please also share with other colleagues, and see you soon on other events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks very much.